Guys, what's up? It's Dark here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a comparison video of some sort. So I'm going to do a video today on what I thought was the hardest tank to complete in the Mage Tower Challenge to the easiest. And I'm going to run through, I'm going to compare them all, their strengths and weaknesses, my experience on them, and just give you kind of an overview from that, I suppose. So as I was completing the tank challenges, uploading guides, I had people in the comments asking me, what do you think the hardest tank is? What do you think the easiest tank is? So what I wanted to do was complete all 6 so I had an understanding of what doing all 6 was like, and then make a video about it. I then at the end wanted to chuck on my suggestions, and sort of hopes, I suppose, if something like this is going to be a thing where solo scenarios have a cosmetic reward attached to them in future expansions, what I'd kind of like to see them do with them. So which tank was the hardest and which tank was the easiest? I'm going to break it down into ranks or tiers, so hard, medium, and easy. I'm then going to expand on each class and talk about what item level I was when I completed it, and what I found challenging about that class. The cool thing I think about this clip is that everyone that watches it is going to have a different opinion. Now, not being able to compare the tanks on an even scale, a set gear level with a set amount of points in concordance, makes it really hard to give a video with opinions that have really a lot of credibility towards them, because everyone's is going to be so different. If you completed this on a 901, you're obviously going to have a lot more harder time than someone that came in and completed it at 930 item level, for example. I think the hardest part about this scenario is actually learning the encounter itself, and I generally think whatever toon that you did this encounter first on is the toon that you are going to think was the hardest tank class to complete it on, just due to that sheer experience of having to wipe and learn the encounter, and the frustration, and then the happiness, I suppose, of actually fucking completing it when you finally get there. So that's what's going to be cool to see people's different opinions for this. So my rankings, guys, from my experiences, top tier, the hardest, are Death Knight and Warrior. The medium tier is Paladin and Brewmaster, and the bottom tier, the easiest, is Druid and Demon Hunter. So they're my opinions. Now, if you're already thinking this cunt is fucking cooked, that's fine. Let me know what your list is in the comments, and I'd love to have a discussion with you about it. So starting off with my experiences, the hardest, the top tier, the Blood Death Knight. So when I completed the Blood DK, it was my first tank, so lots of wipes from when the tower came up pre-nerf. I was item level 901 and I had 47 points in my artifact, so no concordance. This was by far, for me, the hardest tank to complete. Now keep in mind I did this before Blood got its DPS boost in 7.2, and if you go back and watch my kill video, you can actually see how low the DPS is in comparison to some other tanks. This combined with the lack of mobility on a Death Knight, the longest stun cooldown in regards to trying to lock Varus or cooldown when you compare it to things like Hodge or Para or Imprison or Stormbolt, I just found, in my experience, that Blood needed a hell of a lot better execution to complete this than some of the other tank classes. The Nether Horrors casting Netherstorm, which is only seen in the Vengeance Demon Hunter, and the Guardian Challenge also added another mechanic to deal with. Though in the Blood one they did stop when casting Netherstorm and you could outrange them, but it was still something else to deal with. Blood, I think, had an easier time, to be fair, in Phase 1 if you took Rune Tap in managing large Mine Ren hits, as AMS as well. Blood also had an advantage via the self-heal, but you do need to hit something to be able to use it, which means you need to get to something to be able to use it. But I just think due to that mobility issue, it made Blood really hard to complete this on. In saying that though, in saying all of that, as I mentioned at the very start, it was the first tank that I completed this on. I had so many wipes, so I think that's skewed my view into just not being able to let go, that Blood was super hard to complete. So in summing Blood up, its strengths, it's got really good damage output now post 7.2. Self-healing is really strong. Its ability to handle magic and spike damage via Rune Tap and AMS in an encounter where you know things are coming up is also really good. Its weaknesses are that it's slow as fuck. It's got a longer stun CD via Asphyxiate, and only Goblin Glider can actually save you if you get punted off. There are no charge or leap mechanics, obviously, to save you on a Blood Death Knight. Hence the better execution, I think, to complete this. So that's why I have Blood Death Knight at the top at my first. Next up, we have the Warrior. So when I completed my Protection Warrior, I was item level 904 with 1 point in Concordance, and it was the 5th tank that I completed the Tower Challenge on. Now, I've put the Warrior up the top for a few reasons, and again, they may be extremely just set to me, and you may have not found these at all. Phase 1, I found Warriors had the short end of the straw and obviously handling magic damage, but the biggest factor that I found with the Warrior was the different playstyle that came along with it. So the Warrior, as I said, was the 5th tank that I managed to complete, and I'd been used to kind of a much safer playstyle in getting through the towers. I found on the Warrior it was a lot more aggressive, and which actually suited the getting through the scenario a lot more, but it was getting used to being a lot more aggressive on the Warrior, and fuck it, I just need to stomp this to get through it. That actually was the hardest part to get used to. Once I got my head around that, things became a hell of a lot easier. I will say though, on the Warrior, and this really kind of goes against what I'm saying with putting the Warrior on the top tier, once you get to Cruel, Warrior is probably the easiest at handling Cruel in Phase 2 than any other tank. And I know that sounds really dumb after putting it on top tier, but with Spell Reflection, the short stun, the Spell Reflection works on Twisted Reflection and the Nether Stomp Puddle as well, and the high DPS of a Warrior, you really have an advantage in Phase 2. But getting to Phase 2 is sort of a completely different workaround if you're used to other tanks. So that's again just my opinion. So Warrior strengths, it's really solid DPS, really good mobility via Charge and Heroic Leap. Spell Reflect in Phase 2 plays a huge role. Charge and Heroic Leap can also stop you from getting punted off the edge if you take a bad knock from an Infernal, and then you've got your Goblin Glider as a backup. The weaknesses is obviously they don't handle magic damage extremely well, and there's a very different playstyle I think you have to get used to on the Warrior than any other class. So that's my top 2. Moving into the middle tier now, guys. The medium difficulty, Protection Paladin. So my Paladin, when I completed it, was 909 item level with 3 points in Concordance. And this was the 3rd tank that I completed the tower on. Prop Paladin was interesting. I was honestly fucking dreading it due to the increased health pool in Phase 1 and 2 on Varus and Cruel. However, what I didn't even really occur to me was that Avenger's Shield in Phase 1 and the ability to lock down Varus in regards to Mind Rend and Drain Life Cast, it's not a joke, but it makes it really, really fucking easy. Combine with Hodge and the Talent Fist of Justice as well, your Hodge had a really short cooldown, which meant that you had a stun up every, say, 30, 40 seconds or something like that, or maybe even less. So that sort of brought a different element to this. Phase 2 with the larger health pool meant that you had to manage a lot more Annihilates. I think there was actually 5 Annihilate hits that you took on the Paladin compared to maybe 2 or 3 on other classes, which meant that you had to leave your brain turned on for longer, which my brain couldn't actually sustain that amount of effort. And in my kill video, in my kill video, if you go back and watch that, I die without even pressing Guardian of Ancient Kings, which I'm still really proud of to this day. I found Cavalier gave me more than enough mobility to get to Orbs or out of Nether Stomps, and Hodge, as I've mentioned, being on that shorter CD, meant that I was able to manage Cruel's Annihilates a lot easier. So, all in all, I view the Paladin as mid-range. The longer fight certainly makes it above an easy difficulty, but I don't think it puts it into hard. Again, though, you may have had a very different experience compared to if you did it at 890 item level with no points in Concordance or something like that. You may have a very different experience. So for me, Prop Paladin strengths, high DPS, amazing lockdown via Avenger's Shield and Hodge, solid mobility if you take Cavalier. The weaknesses behind it are obviously you have to deal with the larger health pools and the longer fight time, more Annihilate management, and again, only a Goblin Glider can save you if you take a bad punt from an Infernal, because you've got no charge or anything like that mechanics for that. So next up, guys, was the Brewmaster Monk. So Brewmaster Monk, I was item level 914 with 3 points in Concordance. It was the 6th tank that I completed the Mage Tower on, and it was actually the most geared tank I had out of any of them when I completed it, with the least amount of play time. So go figure that out. So Brewmaster, I'd actually pair up with the Warrior in regards to playstyle, especially the way I did it. So Brewmaster has a very aggressive playstyle with the talents that I took. So my first phase involved getting Invoke Dave out straight away and staying into 9 or 10 stacks in Aura of Decay and bursting Varus down. And I was getting Varus down to like 55% in my first burst. On every other tank, I was really used to that safer playstyle, going in 3 or 4 stacks of Aura of Decay and getting out. So again, it was about getting used to the sort of changing the way I was playing this tank challenge. Phase 1 was quite easy to manage Varus with Paralysis being on a 15-second cooldown, so it really sort of paired up with the playstyle behind Vengeance Demon Hunter and Imprison. Phase 2 was pretty much just a matter of staying alive and waiting for Invoke Dave to come off cooldown, and then not being stupid. Annihilate managed was a real joke on the Monk, with Paralysis, Shadow Meld as a Night Elf, an Orb, and then Invoking Dave. I didn't take one single Annihilate hit for the entirety of Phase 2 on my Monk, so I think that kind of lends to how Phase 2 can become really easy on Monk with the right talents. I think there will be a lot of different thoughts though towards the Monk. If you didn't go with Invoke Dave and you went with Special Delivery or Rushing Jade Wind, I think you would have had a very different experience in this tank challenge, and you may actually view Monk as top tier, as one of the hardest tanks to complete, and I could fully understand that. Going through with my setup though, it drastically changed that. So for me, Brewmaster strengths are obviously Invoke Dave if you go down that way. Really solid DPS, really solid mobility. Transcendence, if used properly, would be able to save you from knockbacks and get you around a lot quicker as well if you actually bothered to use it, which I didn't. The weakness of the Monk is obviously its lack of self-healing compared to the other tanks. It really does bottom out on that. So that's it for the Brewmaster Monk, guys, and the mid tier. Let's go to the bottom tier now with the easiest, and we'll start with the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So for me, I completed the Vengeance Demon Hunter at 907 item level with 49 traits, so no concordance as well on this one, and this was the second tank that I managed to complete. I completed Vengeance before the Spirit Bomb buff came in as well, which I think it's important to say, just in case you think it's the reason I'm saying it's easy. When I did Vengeance Demon Hunter, Fell Devastation was the go-to talent, Spirit Bomb wasn't a thing, but it still was very easy in comparison to some of the other tank classes. The mobility and lockdown of Vengeance Demon Hunter has in this is pretty crazy. I already knew the encounter from my wipes on the Blood DK, so as I've mentioned, that gave me an advantage, but if you get smashed on a Vengeance Demon Hunter, you can glide down. Imprison's on a 15-second cooldown, and you can just interrupt Mind Rends with that and wait till your stacks drop off. You can glide around, you can Infernal Strike around. It just was fairly easy. When the Spirit Bomb buff actually came in and was broken in 7.2, the Mage Tower was actually up, and it was pretty much just a free appearance. And even now that it's been tuned down with Spirit Bomb, it's still, I think, drastically easier on the Vengeance Demon Hunter than it is on any other class. So strengths for the Vengeance Demon Hunter are their high DPS, their self-healing, their mobility, their lockdown with Imprison, and their weakness. Honestly, as I sat here writing this out as my notes, I couldn't even fucking think of one for Vengeance Demon Hunter. I cannot think of a weakness. Maybe you guys can. Maybe it's like sigil management to interrupt the ads or something, or to silence, but I could not think of a weakness for Vengeance Demon Hunter in here. So the last tank, guys, the Guardian Druid. So Druid, I was 912 with 3 points in Concordance on, and it was the fourth tank that I completed the Mage Tower with. So this tank, I think, can really have an argument around its legendaries in regards to its difficulty. I had Lufas and Eco Wrath, which made this a joke, and I openly admit that. If you don't have these legendaries, you may have had a very different experience in this. So originally, if you didn't know, a lot of Druids completed this when the tower was pre-nerf, because in Phase 1 you could prowl up to Varus and bash him, and that would stop his Aura of Decay from actually spawning, which meant Phase 1 was a tank and spank and kill the ads. So obviously that got fixed, but that would have been amazing to experience. I was very familiar with the encounter by the time I came to do the Druid, which, as I've said through all of these, serves as a large bonus. But the legendaries I had combined with Balance Affinity just made it a joke. I could just take Incarn and I just spam Thrash like an idiot on the side of Aura of Decay, and when it rang out, I was just rotating swipes and thrashes. The only time I would have to enter Aura of Decay was when I needed to Skull Bash or Drain Life. I'd get one stack of Aura of Decay and I'd be straight out again, rotating Thrash and Swipe again. So that made this really fucking simple, but it comes down to legendaries. Now, I don't know how much of a part they actually play in this to that extent anymore. I have seen videos without Eco and without Lufas of people still being able to stand on the edge of Aura of Decay and hit with swipes and thrashes, and if that's the case, then there's, it's still a lot easier on the Druid than it is on any other class without having to take stacks of Aura of Decay. The Druid also has the strongest artifact ability use out of any other tank class, which is amazing. Stampeding Roar combined with Guttural Roars generally gives you enough mobility as well to be safe on the bear. So the bear just had a really good toolkit for this challenge, even with the larger Aura of Decay circle. So strengths for me that I would put for Guardian Druids: Balance Affinity, Thrash and Swipe Span if you were RNG blessed from Blizzard, decent self-heals, best artifact ability to use, Wild Charge and Skull Bash can save you from being punted off as well. Its weaknesses: if you probably use Stampeding Roar at a wrong time, you're kind of out of mobility unless you're using Skull Bash to get out of green shit on ads and then using a Mighty Bash for an Annihilate, or a Twisted Reflection. But yeah, the Druid sort of wasn't solid on mobility, but at the same time, if used properly, really wasn't sort of too bad. So I kind of seesaw on that one. So that's it, guys. They're my experiences and my opinions. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, as always, I would really love to hear about it. But they're just my thoughts from what people wanted to hear. So finishing up with my suggestions or improvements that I think could have been in these ones, and what I'd like to see going forward if this is something that Blizzard are looking at, and I hope they are. And I've said this a number of times in my Talk Legion vlogs, so I'm all for things being accessible to people. Okay, I don't want to be the special snowflake where there's only one on each server, or you have to play 60 hours a week to obtain something, yada yada yada. However, I do like people to have to improve and work at things to get them. So what I think a much better thing would have been with these scenarios is an item level limit, and I've said it over and over. Now, whether you want to scale people automatically when they get in there, or you want to make a ceiling buffer of, say, item level 915, and the catch-up or the improvement mechanic for people on that was that they could have unlimited concordance points in their weapon, and the Netherlight Crucible in 7.3 would have made this easier again. I just feel this would have been a much better approach and given a lot more meaning, I suppose, to these challenge skins. So, my head kind of just goes straight to the new raid when, let's say it's 7.3.5 when that comes out. If you follow the kind of gear trending path that we've had from, Nighthold to TOS to this new raid, you might have people doing these Mage Tower challenges in 950 or 960 item level, with legendaries that are at level 1000 and a bunch of points in concordance. And you kind of can't really give any credit to that being a challenge anymore. Like, I could not imagine going back and doing these challenges with 40 or 50 more item levels. I think it would just be a fucking joke. And when the tower first came out and Q&A came up, Iron actually said that these weren't made for everyone to complete, that these were a challenge, that, not everyone was going to be able to complete these during Legion. However, with the Netherlight Crucible, with the new artifact knowledge, and with a new raid coming out and the item level bump going up, I kind of find that really fucking hard to believe unless you are playing with your nose. I've really enjoyed this scenario element. I would just like to see it have more meaning and more longevity. So, cosmetic rewards are always awesome. In MOP with the challenge modes, we had a mount and we had the armor. In WoD, we had a mount and we had weapons. In this, challenge modes got removed for Mythic Pluses, and they brought in these solo scenario content for cosmetic rewards, which are fucking awesome, and I love them. I'd love to see them have a future though, and I would love to see them be either scaled or have an item level ceiling to them. By all means, have some kind of catch-up mechanics, whether you nerf them by a small percentage, each 6 months or something like that, but make them still relevant and make people still work towards having to get them. So that's just my opinion, guys. Anyway, it's my 2 cents. Keen to hear what you think, if I'm wrong, if I'm a douchebag, if I'm cooked, whatever. But thank you very much otherwise for taking the time to check out the video, guys. I really do appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. See you guys.